Welcome back to the Young Hearts Run Free podcast, Jasmin Paris. How are you, Jasmin?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on, and it's nice to be chatting with you both again.
Thank you, Stephen. How are you?
Oh, I'm excited to be chatting with Jasmin again. We've got lots of ground to cover since we last chatted, which was March 2023. But
Yeah.
that was an epic discussion, and there's all will be revealed.
Yeah. Season 7, episode 16, for those who wish to go and look at the back catalogue. We spoke with Jasmin, and already the questions are in my brain. I'm going to start with one though, Jasmin. How has recovery been since the Barkley Marathon this year? How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Yeah, actually, this week I'm sort of starting training again. I have had pretty much. I mean, I basically had 2 months of not doing that much. I've done I did the Scottish Highlands Peaks race, and I did a kind of Ramsey support this last weekend. But those are kind of the two big things. Mainly, I've just been running for fun a bit without a watch, doing some cycling, a bit of outdoor swimming. Yeah, keeping it pretty low key. Injury wise, I'm okay. I kind of injured my medial collateral ligament on my good knee a little bit at one point, actually on the first loop of Barkley this year. So that's been the kind of one injury that's sort of been a bit, persistent, and it's just settling down properly now. But apart from that, I think it's just the tiredness, and that probably took a little bit longer to shake than I might have expected. But I guess it's just because I didn't. It's difficult. It's been difficult to get really good recovery. I think, you know, the kind of classic challenge of working full time, having small children, but then on top of that, quite a lot of requests for media stuff and some really exciting things. But it's been pretty full on the last couple of months, especially the first few weeks. So I think that maybe the recovery wasn't quite as good as it would have been otherwise. If I'd had a month to just sleep, then I think I'd be absolutely bouncing around by now. But yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm looking forward to kind of getting back into it, and it's so nice that it's sunny again, and it's been really nice to be back on the hills, just kind of enjoying myself and remembering why I love running. Getting past that sort of suffering suffering experience of of kind of putting myself through the ringer a bit, and just getting back to enjoying being out in the hills and having fun with friends.
That's great to hear, and it's certainly not been a standard couple of months since Barkley, given what actually occurred during Barkley, which we'll get to. And you spoke about being quite busy with media requests. We were haranguing you quite quickly, so apologies if we contributed to that. But I actually spotted you down at London Marathon. You were up front and central, which, for people in our sport or the more niche area of the sport is quite rare. And you were also, front page news on BBC websites, where your exposure at that, it's like passes quickly, the news cycle at that, but it lasted, didn't it? You were certainly a hot topic the week post Barkley. So how did that feel for you? Sorry, John, I'm jumping off piste.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit weird. I mean, I sort of still, even after kind of experience a bit of this after the spine race in 2019, I still find it a bit bizarre to think that, people asking for a selfie on the street, that's really odd to me, because I very much feel like a normal person, and just like anybody else. So yeah, it's a bit bizarre, it's a bit overwhelming sometimes, but at the same time it's also like really wonderful. Like, I guess I've had lots of messages from people and letters from school kids, and messages from parents saying, I've inspired their little girl to keep playing football despite the fact that she's the only one with the boys, or yeah, letters from girls saying that they want to grow up and do Barkley Marathons. I guess so that those kind of things have been really inspiring to me, and I think, I realize how privileged I am to be in a position where I can touch people's lives across the world, because it's been really big. I mean, it's gone, like, I've been interviews for requests from Australia and New Zealand and South Africa, and done radio and TV in Canada, and like it seems really big. So the thought that you could touch people's lives all across the world, I feel like that's an incredible privilege. I feel really lucky to be in that position, and I guess I think that comes with a certain kind of responsibility to try and do it well, and maybe to take up that opportunity and try and do some good. So I guess, there's been a lot of really positive sides to the kind of media stuff. It's just learning to balance it a bit with as I say, trying to keep on doing work and being a mum as well.
Oh, Jasmin, you done it well. You didn't have to do it well. It was brilliant. David Miller, photographer. This wasn't intended to be what I was talking about at this point. But David Miller described it as the greatest ultramarathon achievement of all time, which is quite phenomenal. And what you've just been speaking about getting, I love that, getting letters from children and parents about being an inspiration. People who had no interest whatsoever in running or ultramarathons were speaking about the Barkley Marathons and Jasmin Paris being the first female finisher. And I think we'd said on the podcast just after you'd finished the Barkley Marathon that it's inspirational, yes, for people, but more importantly for me, father of a young woman, inspirational for women everywhere to have done this. And I think what you've just described, a lot of people get exposure with things and a platform for things, not always in a positive way, but everything's positive about this. So thank you very much for that. It means so much. We spoke to you last year when you'd been to Barkley and you completed the fun run. So, and I think we maybe spoke about there was a bit of a desire to return. But what were your lessons learned from 2023 Barkley that you put into place in 2024?
So, I mean, there's the obvious things that came from both 2022 and 2023, which is the navigation. So I think the more times you run around those loops, the course changes a bit from year to year, and it did change a bit this year. There was a new section, which people have probably chatted about. I'm happy to kind of say a bit more about, but in general, the majority of the course, quite a lot of the course is similar, if not the same. And so those experiences, having run it before, really helped, not just in terms of recognizing the landmarks to help you sort of change direction or take a turn, specifically find a cut through a particularly bad area of kind of undergrowth, but also because when you're about to make a mistake, you recognize it early, or you are able to prevent it entirely. So you might just basically recognize that you were making a big mistake and stop it before it becomes a disaster. So, if you can correct a mistake with a 5-minute or 10-minute deficit rather than a half-hour deficit, then Barkley, that's a really big thing, because you'll find that even the best runners, they're John Kelly and Jared, they still make some mistakes. It's not like they're completely foot perfect the whole way around, because it's almost impossible to be foot perfect there, just with the nature of the terrain and the navigation and being tired on the later loops and so on. But the key is to recognize it early and to correct mistakes early. That's why it's so important to be focused the whole time. So navigation, I think, was the biggest thing in terms of what you've learned from previous years. But the other kind of key difference is I think physically I was better prepared, and that's partly because of the training, but also partly because this year I came into it just feeling fresher. I actually made a conscious decision last year, and there was lots of reasons. Part of it was that my dad wasn't very well, and it was quite a lot of kind of family stress around that time. But I made the decision not to race the Tour de Géant last September. So I actually took basically sort of August and September into October. I had off. I didn't train at all. I just did that whole thing of forget the watch, forget the kind of training schedule, leave the coach behind. I just did my own thing because I knew that I was just really tired, and I'd been sort of balancing this like subtle fatigue for like a year or two, and then on top of it there was this kind of, as I say, some family stresses going on, and I decided, like, I want to finish Barkley. If I'm going to have another go next year, I thought to myself, you need to go into the winter feeling fresh and good, and if you run the Tour de Géant now, that's not going to happen. So I made that conscious decision, and I stepped away from that. And I think that basically that meant that when I came into training for Barkley, I just felt good, and I just felt better than I had for ages when I actually went to Barkley. And that, I guess that feeling allowed me to train in the way that I really wanted to train. So I did more ascent. I did kind of some double training sessions, like stair climbing in the gym in the evenings on top of the training session that I did in the morning. But quite often, I've managed to do 1,000 meters just in the morning, 10 miles, whatever that I did, and then I'd do, my longer runs where I did manage to do up to almost 5,000 meters in sort of my long run at the weekend. Kind Ben Ledi one weekend, I went up Ben Ledi 5 times in the course of one training run, one morning. So that's the sort of thing that I was doing. And then on top of that, I was doing quite a lot of more consistent strength work with weights, and that really helped in terms of I've got this chronically injured left knee where I tore my cruciate ligament when I was 17. And I just felt this time going into Barkley, my knee felt better than it had done for years and years and years. I just felt really solid, like really confident about it. So suddenly I had essentially 2 working legs rather than 1.5. That's been the case for a little while. So all those things came together. And then there was just this self-belief. And I think it was partly the reasons that I've already talked about, but there was something else, something like just some certainty that I was going to do it, some like positive mental. And I can't really quite say why it was, but just I went into the race this year feeling like confident about it. I just had this inner it's just the belief that it was going to be possible. And the crazy thing is that I couldn't predict the weather, but it was almost like it's something, a part of me knew that felt like it was going to be okay. And then the weather forecast was good, and I was like, it's on, that's the attempt's on. And yeah, if you asked me before, and I talked to friends, and I was like, I'm going to do it. And I guess you need to have that approach to it. You have to believe that it's possible. But I genuinely did it. It wasn't just saying it. I just felt something inside like it was possible this year. And I honestly think that's the main thing that carried me through. Because if you look at kind of statistics wise, there were so many points, especially on that final loop, where realistically, if you looked at the stats, you'd have said she's not going to finish it. But inside, I didn't ever lose hope at that. Like until the last few minutes when I suddenly was doubting whether it was going to be possible. Until that point, I was honestly like, I can do this. I really can do it.
Can I ask, from March last year, or February, March last year, 2023, till the Barkley Marathon this year, leaving last year, was it a strong thing to say, I'm going to come back and do this? Or when did that belief that you're going to do it happen?
I wanted to go back. I think from the moment I came back from that Barkley, I was like, I'm going to come back. So that knowledge that I want to go back was there already. I mean, I remember talking to Damien straight after that year, and I was like, I think we both felt we're coming back. The belief that I could do it, I think, was more, that was more like February time this year.
Right.
That I was like, I think this is gonna, I think I can do this. End of February.
And did you'll obviously share what you want to share. So I'm going to ask some probing questions. Why not? Did you work on that side of things with somebody to discuss things, to work on that mental game, or was it just something internal?
No, I think it's just something internal. Well, I honestly can't entirely pin it why I just thought it could happen. I think part of me part of me wanted maybe part of me subconsciously was aware of the fact that I wasn't going to be able to keep doing this forever. Like I couldn't keep taking myself back across. For one thing, I'd try not to fly to races because the environmental footprint. And partly because it's just a big ask to take that period out of your life. It's been kind of like pretty overwhelming, this sort of obsession with Barkley. But I've got a young family. I've got my kids and my husband, and there's work, and there's a limited number of years that I can just give away to this obsession that I had. So part of me was just like, I need to get this done. I need to get it done, and so I'm really going to throw everything at it. I'm going to focus on it, and it's going to happen. And so, then it just did. I didn't have any sort of coaching or anything. I honestly think that I have a really strong intrinsic desire when I want something, and certainly with Barkley, I really wanted it. There was just this overwhelming intrinsic desire to get it done, and that's what carried me through.
Love that term. And did you say there that you had a coach, or but you've got a coach for your running?
Got the coach for running, so
but no in terms of psychology and stuff, which was what the question that John was asking.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, exactly, yeah. So Damien coaches me running
Yeah.
wise, but quite a few people have asked, and or some people have even been surprised. Maybe in areas, some areas of the world, it's more of a thing, especially for athletes, to have like a mental
Mhm.
coach to do that side of things. But yeah, no, I don't have anybody like that.
Somebody like Damien will have that in his armory as well, I'd imagine, though. He'll have,
Yeah,
having done what he's done. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes you can
yeah,
almost glean what you need just from that aspect rather than having a specialised.
exactly, yeah,
Can I ask, did it also help that, like, you know the lie of the land there now? Like, I don't mean just the lie of the
yeah,
land at Frozen Head State Park, just, the travel, the, the,
yeah, yeah,
like, quite, it's not your hood. Well, I think you could actually class it as your hood now, by the way. I own this place. I would be if I was in your shoes. But do you know what I mean? The logistics of getting from airport
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Does that also mean that there's less stressors?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even down to simple things like you know where the supermarket is, you know what you can buy there, what you need to bring with you, just like little things like that. So you're right, all of that, and especially I think because to be honest, and I would never found it too disturbing, but Laz throws a lot of things into the race, and now it's obviously Carl taking over. But Laz, there's a lot of things about this race that are kind of put there, almost created to sort of throw you and to make you sort of uncertain and anxious beforehand. The whole thing about not knowing when it starts and just, I think when you first go there and you have no idea about these things, like about marking up your map and all that sort of thing, then that's like added challenge to cope with
Mhm.
all that on top of, not knowing about the books and how all that works. Whereas once you've been there on your third time, that's all just old hat. And like, I didn't even, I fell asleep fine in the evening and it was interesting because I woke up on the dot of midnight, literally just suddenly I was awake and I looked at my watch and it was dead on like midnight. And so I must something inside me, a mental inner clock must have been like he could blow the coach at any moment. And I woke up at that point. But then I went back to sleep again. So I guess, yeah, I was fairly relaxed about all the other stuff that's around this race that's designed to make you stressed. And I sort of let that pass me by a bit. So it was quite good that I could focus on the actual race.
Yes, Laz's curveballs were
Hmm.
batted.
Mm.
Brilliant.
As you said though, Stephen, that going back for the third time, you know that you're going to have to do your maps and you know you have to do that stuff and you'll go back and think of what you did previously. But can we speak about Conrad and your support crew? Can we speak about that and
Yeah, yeah.
how vital a part that plays, that somebody understands what you need when you need it. You might not know what you need, but they do. Do you want to speak a wee bit about that, Jasmine?
Yeah, I'm so lucky because obviously, I mean, Conrad's been there now with me each time, so he knows it as well, and he's just incredible. There's nobody else I would want to be supporting me more than Conrad at an event like that. Not only does he know me inside out, so he knows when he knows what I need. Like he knows when I need a hug. He knows when I just need like get back out there. We also almost don't need to talk to each other. But he's also just like super efficient. He doesn't faff. He just gets on with it. He doesn't talk much. He just does the job that needs doing. Um, he's not one for like lots of chat and stuff. He's just there. He's like solid as a rock, and you could tell when he like from bits of the video. Like I knew he was pleased. I didn't need anyone to tell me, but other people see little fist pump at the end when I kind of reach the gate on the videos, and you can tell how pleased he is as well. But yeah, I couldn't like I feel like I couldn't have done it without him because it's apart from anything else, it's also all the training, because invariably he has to take on a bit of extra load in terms of the kids and things when I'm out doing all that training in the early mornings and things. So yeah, huge thanks to him. But I mean, it's even little things like when I was out and I found bananas were working for me. He went out into the shops at some point and obviously he bought more bananas, and it was a bit like I think when I was eating my third rice pudding, I suddenly was like I was thinking, but I thought I only had two rice puddings. But clearly, because I'd eaten one each of the loops before, he'd gone back out and knowing that that was something that I might eat. So he'd gone to the shop, and it's just like having someone that's really on it like that, thinking ahead and what might be needed. Yeah, it's so important.
And it's a shared achievement for you both, isn't it? It's a dream you both had.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we'll get to the finish and we'll speak about that magical time. But the whole thing's been magical. And we've got to say as well, Conrad's not a bad runner himself. He podiumed at the
Yeah.
Spine this year, didn't he?
He
You know,
did.
so-
He did. He's incredible. He's really talented. Yeah, I think he's incredibly talented himself, as I say. And he's been really good in terms of letting me take the kind of front seat in terms of training and stuff for Barkley. So yeah, definitely owe him one in that sense.
Cool.
Does he not fancy a wee bash at it?
I don't know. He says no.
Okay.
I don't know, but though, because I'm pretty sure he said no, that he wouldn't do the Spine, and then he did it. So I don't really know. I'll just wait and see what happens.
Do you want to say a wee bit about your fellow, I'm going to say competitors, but fellow runners? You mentioned like John and Jared and Damien. Do you want to say a wee bit about, is there camaraderie in the camp?
Yeah. I mean, Barkley's so different than any other races. I mean, people say it's a race, but it's not really a race, because like it's very much more kind of working together as a team in a way. I mean, yes and no. I think the race creates an incredible sense of camaraderie, and that's partly because when you're out there, working together is the best thing that you can do, and also because you're kind of out there struggling with pretty significant adversity at times. Certainly for me, it was a real struggle at times, and you're kind of doing it together, and you're supporting one another as much as you can. At the same time, everybody's sort of in it for themselves. Like you have to be eyes focused on the goal. You can't like hang back and wait for anybody. That's absolutely, it's like when I was kind of struggling and falling off the pace, both when I fell off the pace of the group with John and Damien and Ihor, I just told them like go. Damien was like hanging back a bit. I was like, go, you need to go. And the same again when I was with Greg and Gerard in the kind of fourth loop. I was like, you just go. I'll say I'll catch you up in a minute type thing, even though it was clear that I was not going to be able to do that. So like, as I say, it's this incredible camaraderie, and so I think that when you finish, it's almost like a kind of shared achievement, and it very much felt like that when I finished Barkley. It really felt like it was a team effort, even all the support crew that were there. But I think there was this moment on going out onto the fifth loop when Gerard offered me the clockwise direction, and I think that kind of sums up what the sort of spirit is Barkley's like, what the integrity of the runners that are out there is like. It's just this, yeah, you're at that kind of, you'll push yourself to those limits, and you still have, he still had he still was able to do that, to offer that kind of incredibly generous kind of offer to me of taking the clockwise direction, which was a slightly easier direction at that moment, and giving me essentially, I think, a huge boost, and also the chance to finish, really. So I think, that just says it all. I think that moment says it all about what the spirit of Barkley's like, and what that kind of community's like, and what the camaraderie's like. And and I think those kind of experiences out there when you're struggling together through that, like that new section full of brambles, and where we're sort of all not all having a terrible time as we worked our way through these thick brambles in the darkness, getting scratched, and then this huge, incredibly slow progress, but we were doing it together, and you come out of it at the bottom and you're like, you've done it all together, and everybody's been through that experience, and it just brings you closer in a way that's it's difficult to do in any way in ordinary life.
I was just going to say, you described that brilliantly, and unlike actually I've heard him describe it before, and I'm imagining it's like going out for in some way, a big group run, the biggest of big group runs, like meet at the car park there, and we're on it for, well, more time than you can ever imagine, with more vert and challenging terrain. But it's kind of summed it up in my head as to exactly how it feels there, that you're with these other people and that shared experience. And it wasn't just me who went through those brambles, it was all of us, and we've come out the other end and we're still here, and let's laugh about it now. I don't know if you love laughing about it, or let's compare scratches.
And you've all got this kind of common goal. You all want it, and you want it for everybody else as well. But you are like, your eyes are on the goal, like you're chasing the goal, and you want it for everybody else as well. But you have to stay focused on you, because otherwise, there's no time to stop for anyone. So it's this kind of like
self-centered, and teamwork.
Exactly. I mean, you'll get to books, and like generally, if there's a group of you, especially if you've been together for a longer period, then whoever gets the book gets it out, pulls out everybody's pages, hands them out, and that actually means that the last person that gets there actually sort of catches up a couple of minutes, because in the time it takes to get the book out, pull out the pages, hand them out, and put the book away again, you've caught up 2 or 3 minutes. And if you're actually there with them, then you get to get out something to eat and eat it. And then you sort of, what naturally happens is that you sort of take turns in getting the book out, unless somebody's obviously easily at the front every time, in which case they're more likely to be getting the book out. But generally what happens is, if you kind of rotate it a bit, and that every little thing like that saves time, and it actually makes sense for everybody to work like that together, because if you think about 15 books on a course, then you might be saving yourself, if each book is taking you 2 minutes, and you're saving yourself half an hour, that's half an hour of eating time. And actually out there, when it's so difficult to find time to eat, because you're going up the really steep hills and using your poles, so it's difficult to like put things in your mouth at the same time as using poles on a steep uphill. When you're running downhill, you're literally like careering down a steep slope. It's again not easy to put things in your mouth when you're trying to just ride it out. So as I say, every moment that you get to do something like that, you kind of make the most of.
Wow. And you get, sorry John, I know I was going to say, you get people who completely just love running on their own for the whole solitude of it, and yet actually at Barkley, that's a tactic that could cost you a finish, or a loop finish, or whatever it may be, because actually this isn't for lone wolves. This is for...
I mean, I feel like you get plenty of solitude out there, even if you're running with others. Like it doesn't feel like crowded. Do you know what I mean? You still get that sense of solitude, even when you're with other people, because it's not like really anybody says anything. Like occasionally there's a bit of chat, but often it's just like silence. Or like when we were running with John Kelly, like he was falling asleep in the night, and then he starts to make noises, like these kind of like grunting, shouting noises, which is like typical for him. But and then at one point Sebastian on loop 2 started singing in French, and so like there'll be moments like that of like that you really remember afterwards, as these kind of like standout moments of either humor or joy, or like really kind of classic moments. But a lot of it is just like everybody's struggling with their own inner kind of struggle, and you'll just be silent and listen to the sounds of people breathing. That's it.
Quite a unique environment, isn't it? It's fantastic. But what I was thinking there, I was thinking 2 things. I was thinking about marginal gains when you're talking about somebody taking the pages out and doing that. And just when you then described about you're saving half an hour when you can then be eaten. But a crazy thing entered my head. Welcome to the world of John. Do you recognise any of the titles of the books?
I don't, like, to be honest, like I don't, when I'm out there, I don't look at the titles. Like the immediate thing is literally, let's say, everything is about saving seconds and time.
Page,
so you just
gone.
pull out the book, you open it, you pull out your page and shut it. So I can honestly say that I got out of there and might have looked at 2 book titles or something in the whole thing. But when I get home, then I'll look at the titles of the books. So, like when I get home, you obviously got all my pages and they're all stored away. I mean, one day when I'll get properly organised, it'll all be beautiful. At the moment, it's all just like a big bag of stuff because I've not had time to do anything since Barkley, like all the things in my life. But they are kept. So at one point, when I'm an old lady, I'll iron them all out and like be able to like look through them, and it will be all beautiful.
I love
but just
that.
not yet.
I love that.
I've got my race bib numbers. Jasmine's got the books for the Barkley Marathon. It's like levels here.
And they're just sitting there. That's fine. I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm glad it was on my list of things to speak about. That moment with Jared when going out on the final loop. It's probably my most watched YouTube clip in the last 3 or 4 months. But an amazing moment that was captured. I don't know who it was that captured it, but it was an amazing moment. Can you see how that felt?
Yeah, I mean, it was incredibly kind of uplifting and inspiring and a huge kind of boost. I mean, when I actually came into the camp, I think I sat on the chair, I felt really awful, and I sort of said, I'm going to take 3 minutes to power nap. I just felt really, really sick, and I knew that I was going to really struggle to eat anything. And I've never actually been sick in a long race before, but I was sick at that point in that kind of changeover after I tried to eat a rice pudding. So I was really feeling pretty bad. And somebody said behind me, like, Jared's about to go out. If the clockwise directions available. If you want it, then go now. And part of me was like, I just can't stand up right now. I can't get up. I can't face going out. And another part of me was like, the part of me that was like, you absolutely are going out, like no excuses. That part of me was like, but it's not right. It wouldn't be right anyway, just to step right in front of him at this point when he's about to set off, and take that direction. So like I was sat there in the chair anyway, and he came over and he offered it, and I sort of said, no, you like, I'm fine with whatever, like you take it or something. But then Gary Robbins called him over from the side, and Gary Robbins said to me afterwards, I didn't hear it at the time, but he said to me afterwards, she's not going to ask for it. You need to like give it to her. And so like he came back over and he was like, if you're ready to go, clockwise is yours. And then, so then I got up and got a banana and asked for my page and went off. And I sort of like remember sort of like my legs were all wobbly as I set off down the track, and the idea of like climbing up all those hills again was like pretty daunting. But just the knowledge that he'd done that, it was like he believed in me, but it was also this like incredible sacrifice. I think like it shows a lot about who he is as a person, I think. So that was kind of hugely, it was like he believed in me, as I say, and like I felt like he just added extra weight to that thought that I could do it, and that everybody was behind me. So and it also obviously gave me the advantage because it is a little bit easier in the clockwise direction, partly because the two worst climbs you're coming down rather than going up. The kind of, obviously doing the same amount of climbing in total in terms of vert, but it's the kind of the terrain that you're on that's different. And that also navigationally, certainly the second half is easier, I think, clockwise than it is anti-clockwise. So it was a big boost.
We've spoken a lot about the human being connection thing, about whether it's regardless of the distance, but you see somebody that you know, somebody that you love, or a random stranger, and they pass on a good vibe to you. It's like somebody believes in you.
Yeah.
But that was quite extraordinary, that moment. It must have given you a surge of yes, you know. So it was a fantastic moment that sort of summed up who Jared is as a person. So
I agree. I
brilliant.
think now I'm, sometimes I struggle to kind of vocalize to people, because I say this thing of like, when people ask why you do ultra running, you're sort of trying to like, what you're trying to say is it somehow kind of brings you in touch with who you really are. Like I feel like it brushes away all this kind of peripheral, like this kind of stuff that surrounds us in everyday life, all this stuff that we're surrounded by that makes life easy largely, and but it sort of like cuts all that out, and it brings it down to the really simple stuff of kind of who you are. And when I try to explain that, sometimes it's difficult for me, but then now I have this really good example. Like in that situation, Jared was faced with that moment, and that's what he did. That I feel like that's the ultimate kind of example of who that person is. Do you know what I mean? When he was really up against it, and then he had this option, and he did that. He made a sacrifice, and it just shows the kind of So that's I think a really good example of kind of what it says to you as a person in that situation, who you are, who he is.
Talk about pay it forward, eh?
Yeah.
Like that. Would I have done that? Of course I would have. John, of course I would have. Okay. Now you spoke about waking up at midnight and expecting to hear the conch, managing to get back to sleep. When the conch does go on the ground, is that then just almost like the next stage of the project starts with getting prepped and ready to go, and Conrad, right?
Yeah.
Final checks and everything.
I think everybody really has everything laid out the night before. Like, they're pretty much all your kit's laid out next to you. For me, I just I'm head torch. Everything was laid out. I just needed to like put on some Vaseline in the morning. I think I put on some sun cream maybe. But actually what happened was a car alarm went off almost exactly an hour before the conch actually blew, and everybody woke up and started getting dressed. I think everybody was pretty much dressed, and then somebody walked through the campsite and said, "It was a car alarm. It's a false alarm. Go back to sleep." So then, like that moment, then you have to go back to sleep.
That
But
last
interestingly,
curveball.
I think no, I don't think he did it on purpose. I think it literally was like a car alarm. But almost exactly an hour later, if I remember rightly, it was like an hour and 1 minute later, the conch did blow. And I guess at that point, you wake up, you get dressed, you eat breakfast, but you also have to go and get your watch. So that's and this year, like last year, he said he had one touch screen watch. So it was a bit like this idea that you're going there to get it's like Russian roulette. You just get a watch from a bag of like watches or a box of watches. And it's not like he's giving them specific watches, he just brings you one. So this year I got a watch that was like lovely, and it wasn't too big. The first year I had this huge watch that was like this like huge thing bulging out my hand. This year I had a normal watch. The only thing with it, you couldn't really see it that well in certain light, so I'd be like turning it like this trying to see, and that was one of the problems when I was running into the finish, because I couldn't actually see the watch face very well, and I was like so oxygen deficient that just the action of like running along doing that was actually quite challenging to me. So yeah, that was one of the reasons that I wasn't entirely sure what time it was as I like hit that road and gone up to the finish. But yeah, so you do that and then you just basically go to the gate and get ready to start.
Can we jump to the finish? That's
Yeah.
the bit I'm desperate to speak about.
John's like,
I know.
on to the finish. Go.
I know. Let's talk about that last loop, Jasmine, and where was your head? How were you feeling when you set off? You said earlier on you had a desire, and you believed you were going to do this. Did you still believe that going into this last loop? Let's start there.
So yeah, I think going into the last loop, I knew it was possible still. Like I knew it was definitely possible. I guess, you're still really aware that having made so many big mistakes in previous years and on loops, I knew how quickly that can evaporate. So I was really just focused on trying not to make an error. And I think I got round to the point where I crossed over. I guess I might have been like 7 hours in, and I crossed over with people coming the other way. So that was John, it was Greg. Yeah, they were coming the other way. Somebody else as well was coming the other way. Oh yeah, and Ihor as well. And at that point you sort of like oh no, Ihor was going my way. So John, Jared, there must have been somebody else. Greg and oh yeah, Jared, Greg and John going the other way. And at that point I think I'd done what I was most worried about navigationally in that first half, but the fact is I had also lost about 20 minutes at one point. There was a book that I dropped into the stream just too far downstream, and I didn't know if I was too far downstream or upstream. Wasted 20 minutes. And then I kind of messed up a bit in terms of coming up the kind of ridge line with all the brambles. I was trying at one point to get around a cliff, and it turned out you couldn't really get around it. I think in different lights I'd sort of seen it differently and it looked different, and I tried to get around it and there was no way of getting around it, so I wasted probably another 5-10 minutes. So in total I wasted too much time on that kind of first half of the loop. And as I crossed with the others coming the other way, I think John said afterwards that he thought, like she's going to really struggle to make it back from there in this time. She's too short of time. But to me, he just said, he was like really encouraging. He was like, oh, you're doing really great, keep going type thing. And I, in my head, was quite happy with what, I was glad to have got to that point without making any more mistakes. And I still thought it was possible, but I was aware at that point how close it was going to be tight. So I started running in this way. Like I had this tendonitis in my left leg, and I had to like actively tell myself, ignore it, like put it into one side, like that pain, just box it away. And the reason being that when you run, like if you've got a slight limp, you change your gait and it slows you down. But I was especially aware that going downhill, I need to be like really pushing the downhills. Traditionally, historically I've been quite good at descending, like fell racing and things. Descending has been my forte. But I guess I'm really aware that especially if you're injured, you start to move much more slowly downhill because you're more ginger. And I was aware that I couldn't do that. I needed to be going as fast as I could. So I kind of boxed that pain away, and I was like timing myself essentially to giving myself splits to be in the valley and at the summit and so on. And when I went through the fire tower with like 3.5 hours to go or something, again, I think people afterwards were saying she can't make it back from here, because I think I had significantly less time than Ihor had, and he obviously ran the whole thing, an hour and a bit faster than me. But I still believed I could do it. And at that point, I almost kind of felt like it really felt like I was running again. Like I felt like it was on this massive wave of adrenaline. I'd hardly eaten anything, but I still felt like I had all this energy suddenly, this adrenaline. It must have just been a huge amount of adrenaline. And it was kind of exciting. I was doing every top for the last time. Every time I got to the valley, I was like, that's another kind of top done, and you're one hill closer to home. And as I climbed up to the last summit, I got to the summit and I was like, you can make it down from here, you've done it, and then I started the descent and I was still really pushing myself. At one point I actually tripped and flew headlong into a bank of leaves, and I was a bit shaken by that, and I tried, I had to run a little bit more slowly for a couple of minutes, and then I really tried to put my foot on the gas again. But I don't know how it's possible that a descent went on forever and ever. And I was kind of, I couldn't really swallow at that point. My mouth was so dry because I was breathing so hard, and I wasn't allowing myself, I didn't have time to keep taking sips of water. So I was just breathing hard, and my mouth was so dry. And the only way I could swallow was when I took a sip of water. So I just didn't swallow. So I think I had 2 sips of water on that whole sort of 45-minute descent. And I finally got into the valley, and because I couldn't believe these switchbacks were going on, and I was just waiting to hit the valley, and I was like, come on, it's got to, and I was looking at my clock and my watch, and it was like, just the time was just, it was like it was disappearing like sand. It was just, and suddenly I was down to like 15 minutes to go, and then I had like 12 minutes to go, and I finally hit that last bit of trail, and I think I had 8 minutes to go. And I was thinking in my head, this must be like a kilometer or something, and some of it's uphill, and suddenly I was like, that was the moment when I wasn't sure anymore that I could do it. And I think all that time I'd been riding on this wave of adrenaline and joy that I was going to finish the Barkley Marathons. I was going to achieve my dream. And then suddenly I was like, suddenly I had this sort of vision that I was going to get there seconds over, and like I was going to have to do the whole thing again. And it was just really awful. Like it really wasn't. I forget that, shudder when I think of it, like it's like a little bit of post-traumatic sort of because it was really awful at that moment. And I just kind of dug. I sort of promised myself, just keep running for as long as you can. Get to the road, just try to run all the way to the road. And somehow I managed to kind of shuffle at this pace, and I just was like, just breathing so hard, and kept going. And then I hit the road, and there wasn't time. And then at that point, somebody saw me and spotted me, because until that point, all the bit through the valley, actually in previous loops, there'd been people around there. But this last loop, I think everybody was gathered at the gate. So it was actually like a ghost town when I was approaching, when I got into that valley. And it was almost like everybody had already given up and gone away. It felt really strange. And that sort of compounded that feeling of maybe it's all over, I'm not going to do it. And so when I finally got to that kind of bit of road that sort of turns around the corner and leads up to the gate, then someone spotted me. Then a kid spotted me on a bike, and I think he sort of came up to me, and this guy ran up to me and was shouting at me, pump your arms. And at that point, as I say, that was where I'd promised myself I would be allowed to walk if I had enough time, but I didn't have enough time to actually keep going. And I sort of got round the corner and saw these people sort of lining the way to the gate, and they were cheering and shouting and clapping, and it felt like a bit like being a racehorse. Imagine being a racehorse coming into that kind of finishing funnel with all this noise around you. But I couldn't really almost see them. All I could see was the gate. That was, this kind of, and everything around the edges was blurred, because I was so oxygen deficient, and all I could think about was reaching the gate. My body was kind of screaming at me, stop. And at one point I was just almost like, just run faster. At the end you can see I speed up, but it was almost like to get it over with, because I needed to be there to collapse. And you can see at the end of the video that I just run into the gate. Like I'd sort of lost all control of myself at that point. I don't know where I found the energy and the kind of the ability to still run those last kind of and tens of meters. But when I hit the gate, I just collapsed. So like that's when I went over the gate. It was just because I didn't have any control anymore. I was just running like with the very last ounce of what I had. I hit that gate, and then I collapsed, and then I was just breathing there, like lying on the floor breathing, to kind of, again, it was minutes before I could, before I guess I corrected that huge oxygen deficit that I had. And all I could think of when I hit the gate wasn't joy. It was just like relief that I could stop and breathe. That was just, it was just pure relief that I could stop. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then after a few minutes I could kind of sit up, and somebody handed me a can of Coke, and then I sat in a chair. Somebody brought a foldable chair, very kind of ultra runner setting. Blas, I think, said, do we need medical? And and then there wasn't any medical there, obviously, so somebody brought a can of Coke and a foldable chair. And I sat in that, and once I could sit up, and I think I said a few words. I think from what I remember, said thank you to everybody that was there, because it, as I said before, it felt very much like it felt like everybody had been willing me on. It was almost like a team effort, family effort, that everybody was there. And then it was this. Then it was lovely, Then there was a kind of like the slowly sinking in joy of having done it. And I don't honestly remember the exact moment at which I knew I'd done it. Like there wasn't like a specific moment I was like, you've done it, because it was, I think the whole sort of hitting the gate was so overshadowed by the dominant feeling then was just this desperate desire to breathe, that at some point after that, gradually as I came to my senses, with that came the realization that I'd done it. And in that period, somebody had given Laz my pages to count, so he'd like verified that it was true. And then there was this lovely period where people kind of, where you sort of, I guess, reunited with the people you'd been out with on the trail, and and kind of, and then just enjoyed the feeling of being back at the gate and not having to run anymore. And it was good. I guess the only kind of the sadness was, the people that didn't finish that final loop that went out. So, Damien obviously went out ahead of me on that loop in the clockwise direction, and I was looking for him, and I didn't. When I was sort of coming down to book 2, and I didn't see his head torch in the darkness in front of me, and I assumed he'd already kind of, or he just wasn't visible, or he'd already kind of moved on. But in reality, was lost somewhere. Sebastian obviously didn't finish that final loop either, so I shared obviously quite a lot of miles with both of those. So that was kind of, I guess, the slight sort of sadness to that final moments of at the Barkley gate. But other than that, it was really fantastic time for that hour or so that we kind of hung around before going home for a long bath, and then some sleep and pizza and bed.
There's always pizza. Last year, you spoke to us about going out for a walk while the final loop was happening. There was a wonderful sunrise, and you really enjoyed that. But this year was a wee bit more dramatic. That sprint to finish, I never realised until, I think it was Gillian McGill told me recently, in 99 seconds, that before the finish. I mean, that's honestly mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. And thank you so much for such a fantastic description of what you've just shared there. I love as well the fact that you've went to thinking about the people that maybe never completed, and maybe they'll go back again and they'll have their day. I hope we do. Yeah. And we've mentioned David Miller. Some of the photographs taken at the finish were quite spectacular. I've called it as like a JFK moment. Where were you when this moment happened? It's one of these things.
That's one of the really nice things, is that like lots of people have said that to me, and that's what I kind of mean about connecting with people. Like I think that's been the joyous thing of the outcome of Barkley, is that kind of connection with people, with women and girls, but just everybody's like day-to-day lives across the world, and especially exactly what you just mentioned. Like lots of people can tell me where they were when they saw that tweet come through, and I just find that's like mind-boggling that our lives at that moment intersected in that way, that they remember that moment, and I can tell you exactly what I was doing then. So I find that like that makes me like, gives me shivers down my spine when I think of that.
Brilliant. Special.
I think it's those iconic, they're now in the realms of history, the iconic moments that were captured on photography and videos and stuff like that. But I think that you've just given us 3 or 4 minutes of our most iconic content there with that description of your last loop, Jasmin. It was it was phenomenal at the time, but hearing it from the horse's mouth, I know what I was like at the end of my 14-mile hill run yesterday for the last couple of miles, when I'm just heavy-legged and feeling like rotten, and yet actually I can't imagine how much effort that you must have had to get for the soles of your shoes just to and that drive and determination you described. It's just sensational. Thank you. We're going to ask a question about resilience. You've already covered it in Spade Load.
That's done. Yeah, that's done. And I don't know if you know, it's now a thing, and certainly a hashtag. What would Jasmin do when shit gets tough? What would Jasmine do? There you go. That works for me. Works for me. And you mentioned women and girls, and that's just. Stephen doesn't know about this. I always contact people and ask them for a question that's not been scripted. Wild Heart Runners, Debbie Martin Kinsani and Karen Nicol, that's their gig, that's their thing. So I contacted them both and said, if you could ask Jasmin Paris one question, what would you ask? So apologies that you've never heard this yet, but here we go. Debbie had asked, if you could give your younger self a bit of advice, what would it be?
That's quite a hard one. I guess maybe. Yeah, I guess when you start thinking of your younger self, you feel quite protective over them, don't you? Like of kind of how. I guess I used to. It's interesting because I think some of the major things in terms of me as a runner that have changed since I was younger is actually probably changed after I had kids, because it used to seem like running's still really important for me, but in a kind of I think it's in a better way, because like I'm not quite life's like it's about something bigger than just that. So I guess if I was trying to give my younger self advice, it would sort of be a bit to be kind of kinder to myself and to sort of be relaxed about it. I guess that's an easy piece of advice to give, but in time, kind of you'll see the bigger picture, and that's all good. Yeah, to just enjoy it without worrying about it. But quite difficult advice to, I guess, follow when you're at that point, and it all seems. I mean, I think I've reached this really lovely stage. Like I run races, and I run, like, say, team events, like the fell relays or whatever for my team, and I just can go there and really just enjoy it, and I give it my best, but I don't beat myself up about it. And I think that's a really lovely state, because that nobody cares. Everybody's just there to have a good time, and I think that having reached that stage of my life, I think that's certainly for the events that I do, it's just about doing my best and enjoying it. And yeah, so I think that certainly in terms of racing, that would be my advice to my younger self, is just to enjoy it and kind of enjoy being there and having that experience, and that would be it.
Also advice to all our future selves as well. Just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Karen Nichols' question. Karen just did 141 miles in Suffolk at the Backyard Ultra. Would Jasmin Paris ever do a Backyard Ultra?
That's a really good question as well. So I think that's another one. I think, to be honest, I think this falls into that category of races that I'm asked about, and at first I'm like, why would you want to do that? But then I think this is one that's going to grow on me. So I think probably at some point, I think that I just want to try it. Like I don't envisage this becoming my next big thing, that I do loads of backyard ultras, but just I've always been intrigued by doing something new that's going to test me. In the same way that when I was starting the London Marathon, I was sort of offered a place for next year if I wanted it, because I mentioned that I'd never run a road marathon. And so I think I probably will take that up, just because I'd be excited to see what happens when you train for a couple of months to run something fast on the road. And it's just that intrigue of knowing what you can do when you sort of try something like that. So in the same way, I think at some point, I think it's pretty likely that I'll try a backyard ultra. So yeah, I think that's probably on the cards at some point. When it'll happen, I'm not sure.
Okay. Have you ever thought about doing a 10K in Auchterarder in November? Just saying.
Well, maybe if I'm actually going to try and do a bit of faster running in terms of training for a marathon, then maybe I'll be up for that.
Well, you're invited. You're on the guest list, Jasmin. Okay, just.
Thank you.
Start and finish hospitality as well. Is that included?
Absolutely, yes. Lots of. We call the spread of food a purvey. That's a Scottish term for a spread of food. Yeah,
that sounds good. Yeah.
A purvey.
Yeah.
So that's one of the most important aspects. I've actually got a question from Johan L. Cassidy here. There's our Swedish correspondent. That's John. He's keen to know what you had in your pizza after you finished.
You know what? I think what happened was the others were. So I was staying in accommodation with Jim Mann and Damien and Conrad, obviously. So it was like a group of friends, obviously, pretty close friends. and they ate quite a lot of the pizza by the time I got out of bed. So I kind of shuffled into the room, still kind of unable to talk very much. I think I sat down and just ate whatever was left and then shuffled back to bed. So I can't even tell you what it was, but it
That's
tasted
quite
good.
all right. I bet it did. I bet it did. Any pizza's good pizza. We know that.
Another random question just entered my head. Do your kids know what mummy's done?
So my 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old now, not really. I mean, he knows that mummy and daddy go running. That's kind of an established fact of life. But in terms of no, at least he didn't kind of ignore me when I got back this time from Barkley, because there's been the last couple of years he's given me the cold shoulder for leaving him, but this year he was pleased to see me. My daughter, I think she got it a little bit, so she's 6 and she had it at school. Like, her class made me a card saying congratulations, which was very sweet. And and I think some kids friends at school pointed out that they'd seen me on the telly, because just before we went I gave their class a kind of talk about being a vet, because I'm a small animal vet obviously. So I went and did like one of their kind of, her science week, I did a talk about being a vet and some kind of pretend like little experiments. So I've met their class before, so they were all kind of enthusiastic to see me on the telly. So she got a little bit of a taste of it. But it's funny, like I'm just mum for them, which is really good for me. It's like just grounding right back down to earth. So like maybe her kind of excitement about me doing well in the race maybe lasted for about 10 minutes, and then right back into kind of normal life. It's not like this is something that I can carry with me and use to remind her of of anything down. It's very, very much right back down into normal life and kind of the realities of being a mum and on all the things you do on a day-to-day basis.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephen. We've got 2 big questions to finish up. Yeah,
we do. Hopefully you've done your research on these 2 questions, Jasmin.
Yes, I hope so. Yes, I hope so this year.
Perfect. Dialect dictionary is, we have a couple of editions now available in all good bookshops, but we're awaiting a 2024 entry from Jasmin into our dialect dictionary.
So I don't know if this is going to count, so I'm going to see. So this is actually pointed out by my brother. So the word trod for a small path in like a kind of fell running. So he's kind of big English, he's an assistant professor and like does English in New York, but he says this is a word that you don't really hear outside running circles, and it comes from like the old Irish, I think, for like a struggle, this kind of a small path as a trod. So that's what I'm gonna say.
Well, I know
the
trod
term,
is.
yeah? It's a trod, like a sheep trod, yeah.
Exactly that. And my good friend at work, Dave Turner, he runs with Lomond Hill Runners. I think I maybe said that to you last time. And he introduced me to trods, and I just accepted it as, well, that's a term that's used all the time. And I've just adopted trod as a normal.
Same here. Yeah. But my brother says that's just not a word. If you were outside those kind of circles, then it's not a widely used word in the English language.
Isn't it magic when you find a trod that's a bit runnable? Do you know? And you
can
get a bit of momentum on it.
Yeah, they're the most beautiful ones. Yeah.
John.
So I don't know if that counts for your kind of dialect thing.
100% it does.
So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Trod is in. Yes. It will also start a debate amongst our listeners whether it is a commonly used word or not, which we love a bit of debate.
And if it's not, then I can, I've got other backups that I can tell you for local dialects. But I'm going with that one, yeah.
Save that for next time.
Save them for next time, yeah. After that 10K in Octorado, we'll get you back. Right. I wonder if that's something to do. Is it the least or the most trodden path? Is that linked into that?
Nah, man. I just think it's a nice word.
Well, he seems to suggest it comes from this Scottish Gaelic for it's to do with like the word struggle, like resistance.
I like that.
A bit more mystique about that.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap this up with our final question, musical question, Jasmin. This is going to be the last episode of season 10, which means it'll be the last entry your song choice will be the last entry into La Buff Buff Collection Volume 7. What song or track is Jasmin Paris going to share with the Young Hearts Run Free listeners?
So this is, and I'm kind of interested. You've not done a recent podcast with Damien, have you? Or you've not done anything with him recently? Not since Barkley this year.
He's been avoiding us, but we'll get him back soon.
Right. So this is good because he won't have already suggested this then. So on loop, and this is very much Barkley linked. So on loop 2, when we were kind of coming towards the end of loop 2, we'd had this fantastic sunset, and then Sebastian, who he led us sort of down through the worst of this kind of rusty spoon trail, this terribly brambly section. And then we kind of climbed under a couple of hills, and we were running down this bit of trail, a rare bit of trail, and it was at this kind of point in the night when everybody started to feel pretty drowsy, and then he started singing out loud in French, and it was kind of like this fantastic kind of this belting out, this kind of almost opera voice, like really good singing voice, and he was singing in French, so I didn't know what he was singing, but it did feel like, it felt kind of like magical, kind of. It really was fitting for that moment, and it was kind of like weird. It was crazy weird in the way that lots of things in ultra running are, and those moments that are kind of splendid and you remember them as like really standing out. And it was just like, yeah, as I say, it was this group of us, and we were kind of accompanied by this French, this melodic French singing in the night. And afterwards we found out what it was, and it was The Impossible Dream that he was singing in French. So do you know this song?
Is that Matt Monro? Is it Matt Monro sung that?
So I think it is by I'm gonna check. I have this.
To dream the impossible dream.
Yeah,
that one.
yeah,
There you go, yeah.
So, and I
In
think
French.
Damien said there's like a Carter USM version, I think, as well.
Oh, right. Damien going for the
Which he says he likes very much, and I've listened to it, and yeah. So like I think that's the one that I would recommend.
I see it.
And that has like
brilliant.
Yeah, so that I feel like that kind of sums up that kind of shared experience on Barkley, and that's kind of like one of the special moments. So then I feel like you can connect to your listeners in some way, and that's coming a little bit from me and probably a little bit from Damien, and hopefully he's all right with me making that. He writes about it in his blog as well, so it's not just me. Can read his blog.
Beat him to the punch.
I can just imagine people listening to that going, Jasmin spoke about this. This was a Barkley song. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Not just for that. Thank you so much for your time, Jasmin. We've waited patiently. We've bided our time, and you've come up and you have delivered the goods big time. Thank you so much for your time this evening, for chatting with us. Can't wait to see what happens next. We'll sit on that and maybe speak to you about it another time. But I'm really, really happy to have had the opportunity to catch up with you again. I'll hand over to Stephen to sign us off.
Jasmin, tonight was our 200th episode, and I can't think of a more fitting guest or story or achievement that is befitting of such a landmark episode for us too. So thank you so much, and it's great to see you again, and and well done, and congratulations from John and I on what was just an epic achievement over at Frozen Head.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting this evening. So yeah, have a lovely rest of your evening.